Hello. Well, first of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me, not only because I'm very honored to speak to this audience, but because it's my first time in India and I am enjoying every minute of it. So, first of all, what is the cloud? There is a tendency to consider the cloud the internet. And this is a misuse of terms. When we talk about internet providers, we really talk about entities that provide users with the ability to communicate through computer system that processes or stores computer data on behalf of them. So when in the internet, we have communication, data processing, and data storage. What we don't have is the sharing part necessarily. When we talk about the cloud instead, we are talking about a model for enabling convenient on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources that can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort or service provide interaction. Now, we have conducted as part of Interpares Trust, which is the fourth phase of the Interpares project, started in 1998 and will continue till 2018. We did a survey of cloud users. And we received international survey. We received about 750 replies from as many organizations. On the basis of this response, it was pretty evident that the majority of those who use the cloud use software as a service, 42% of them. 21% of them don't really know what they're using. 18% use infrastructure as a service, and 12% platform as a service, and then all sorts of other small things. Now, we also asked why they choose to put their records on the cloud, and the strongest argument is to reduce cost, followed by increasing storage, increasing the performance of the organization, and increasing collaboration. Now, in consideration of these motivations, it is good to look at what is good about the cloud, what are the benefits, and in relation to them, what are the risks? So, talking about cost, the benefits are, of course, you don't have to own hardware or software, you have lower energy costs, you have reduced IT personnel costs, your shared tenant system allows you to pool resources and get better technology. You can get what you need, but only pay for what you use. And you can track and measure use. So this is all good, and these are all the reasons why people who chose to put their archives on the cloud did. Now, the risks, again related to the cost. If you actually calculate the cost of transfer, implementation, and subscriptions, the costs are not minimal. And you cannot plan costs. If you have a large organization, like an hospital, for example, you don't know how much each user is using from a month to another. It is very difficult to plan in a budget what you spend. There is also significant per request charge in order to motivate requests in large chunks of data. Also, normally cloud providers give you a certain amount for free. And then you pay per byte, but you pay a lot per byte. So when you think digital preservation, what can you do? Well, you can rent some storage, like in Amazon, and pay so much per month. Or you can monetize your use, like Google Gmail, selling ads against your access to your email, but you can imagine that this doesn't pay very much when you think archives and long-term digital preservation. Or it can be endowed, but this requires data to be deposited together with a capital sum that is very hard to calculate forever. So reliability, the second reason. The cloud is always there on demand, big or small, wherever you are. It's available from anywhere by using a browser. However, public providers can and go bankrupt. They can disappear, can be sold. Your records might be gone. We have lots of horror stories in those terms. Public and private providers can lose records, sometimes can get them back, or their backup fail. Security. Security can be much more robust on the cloud than anywhere else. No organization can afford the kind of security the cloud will give you, especially because some of the security measures, like data sharding and data obfuscation, can only be conducted on a very large mass of data. So if you have a small archives, you can't do that. Centralized control on data is easier to secure. Risks. Well, first of all, cloud providers use subcontractors. Hackers love to hack in the large cloud because, of course, that what you get is much more than hacking in your small repository. It eventually will occur. And are you told when it occurs? Then the documents can be stored anywhere, can be moved at any time without you knowing. Encryption may be done or may not. Some time ago, 16% of the Amazon directory of business customers were made available to anyone online. And when Amazon was asked, this is your responsibility, what did you do? So no, it's not mine. It's the private individual or the organization that determines its profiles and makes accessible or not the material. So basically we have a very complex technology that is in the hands of non-competent users, the normal people like me and you. We have shared servers, there could be intermingling of information, and law enforcement may seize servers for one person's action, but in the process gets all the material of somebody else. Collaboration, yes, you can have easy collaboration because all files are in consistent format, can be viewed in a web browser. You can access and distribute information across distant geographic areas, and so on. But you have really no control over the records online. You have no control on who shared the servers with you, to whom the services are delegated. You have no control on terms of services which may change at any time. Backup may be done without you knowing, and may not be disposed of as needed. And this is a big problem because more organizations have been in trouble because the records that were supposed to be destroyed still existed than vice versa. Records might be deleted without you knowing or may not be deleted. So, in fact, we don't know what happens in the cloud. The standard of trustworthiness in the cloud is what the Latins used to call caveat emptor, or buyer beware. So what is trust? This trust that we must give to the cloud. In law, is considered a relationship of voluntary vulnerability. Voluntarily, you make yourself dependent and reliant on somebody else, and you do this on the basis of a risk assessment. In business, you do it when you think that the other party has your same value systems. So, for example, if you believe in closed, restricted access, you don't trust somebody who believes in universal access, right? You want to have an alignment of values. In everyday life, it is about substituting the knowledge that you do not have with the knowledge, with other knowledge that you can have. So, for example, I don't know how to drive in Delhi, but I have read the credentials of the driver of my hotel. So I am going in his car. So I am substituting one knowledge with another. So trust is also a matter of perception, and often it is rooted in old mechanisms, like shaking hands. You see the symbol of inter pares is shaking hands. Would you shake hands with Google? Maybe you would. Maybe I wouldn't. The nature of trust relationship, in fact, is fraught with risks. And these risks are related to authorship, ownership, and jurisdiction. The questions we should be asking are about confidentiality, are about forensic readiness. That is your organization ready, for example, for e-discovery, for compliance? It is about the accuracy, reliability, and authenticity of the records. It is about the security, the governance, and mostly the preservation of the records of permanent value. So when we address cloud providers about this, as I go often because I go to their conferences, the classic response you get is choosing the cloud is a risk assessment decision. So risk is the probability that something bad happens multiplied by the impact that this event would have on you. So if what you put in the cloud is scanned photographs that you have in hard copy in your shoebox, if you lose them all, well, it is a disturbance, but it's not a big problem. But if you put in there your house sale contract and you lose that, well, that may be a problem. So that is the kind of assessment that you make. And they say, if you cannot have everything, what it is that you give up? So the first choice is between transparency and security. The cloud gives you security through technology. If they are absolutely transparent of what happens there, of course there is less security. You can't have both at the same time, they say. The second choice is between control and economy. If you want to save money, you have to give up some of the control of what is there. This is all good and well, except it is in conflict with the legislation as it exists internationally in most countries. That's not the way we protect our records and our archives. So, should we put archives in the cloud? Archives, that is, all the records that we need to preserve on the long term. Well, archival institutions are the trusted custodians of our documentary memory. But increasingly, they are moving such memory in the cloud for a number of reasons. Number one, many of the records that they are mandated to preserve already exist in the cloud. They were generated in the cloud, and they are maintained there by the creator. So it's very difficult. It requires lots of money and time and resources to get them down into your digital repository within your organization. Also, access would be possible from any location, and increasingly the users of archives say, I don't want to travel all the way to Ottawa from Delhi. I want to access the records directly online. Also, a trusted digital repository, as described by David, may be very much feasible for classic federal archives, provincial archives, city archives, but you know, there are all these community archives out there and smaller organizations that cannot afford it. It's too expensive. And they don't have personnel with the knowledge to deal with this kind of technology. Also, part of all of this decision is some ignorance. That is, it is often assumed by archivists that if the material is secure, that means it is preserved, while there is a big difference between those things. So today, archives in the cloud is an oxymoron, as it is preservation in the cloud. First of all, conceptually, let me play my part as an archival scientist, probably one of few archivists here. What is an archives? Well, read the Justinian Code, 6th century. An archives is the public place where the records are deposited so that they remain uncorrupted, provide trustworthy evidence, and be perpetual memory of the facts. A millennium later, archives receive trustworthiness from the fact that, number one, the place of storage belongs to a public sovereign authority. 2, the officer forwarding them to such a place is a public officer. 3, the records are placed physically and intellectually among authentic records, so they acquire the nature of the whole in which they belong. And this association is not meant to be broken. So we have two fundamental issues as archivists and as preservers with the cloud. Number one, location independence. The fundamental issue with keeping archives in the cloud is the distinction between the entity responsible for their preservation and access and the entity that stores them. So the archives are responsible, but the cloud provider stores this material, and the jurisdiction under which each is may be different. Now, India, just talking about you, is planning to impose a ban on the use of foreign cloud-based email services to send official communications before the end of the year. So this would prevent civil servants from using the various cloud services. Brazil is doing the same. Europe is very concerned about allowing the data of European citizens to be stored outside Europe. Now, this legislation is going to be useless. And it is going to be useless because people will do what they wish to do, especially now that the Y generation, the young people, the millennial people, are bringing their own devices to work. Who is going to refrain them from discussing with their colleagues at work through their iPhone, storing the material in there, forgetting to transfer it to a repository? It's inevitable that these records are going to be in the cloud. So let's think of a solution. We're working on this. Let's think of parallel situations. While we thought of aerospatial law, right? When you get on a plane, you don't get to interview the pilot because you trust the system that will have done for you. And you know that if you have a baby on that plane, it belongs in that country or the other, right? So let's do the same. We examined the maritime rules of shipping, which centered on the recognition of the authority of the port state, the flag state, and the coastal state. So initially, the jurisdiction was the one of the flag state. A ship decides what flag to use. And then everybody was using the Panama flag, right? So that didn't work very well. So they decided that the port where the ship arrives is the jurisdiction. And then the coastal states, all the states through which a ship travels, have right of inspection. So this could be a model. Let's try and apply it to the cloud. Let's say that a Canadian university puts its archives in the care of an American cloud provider, which maintains the data centers in Brazil. So if you follow the maritime example, the American company is the flag state that moves the goods through the coastal states to the ultimate destination of Brazil. But you see what the problem is. The Canadian university that owns the archives has no jurisdiction. And the coastal states cannot really go and look inside the packet of records as they move. So this is not going to work because it is impossible to enforce. Alternatives. Okay, we have considered the territoriality principle. Doesn't work because we don't know the location of the records at any given time. Nationality principle,